The other big change we see is with the rise of AI, just the idea that you can expand productivity and automate functions and, all the discussion in franchise conferences around the agent process of how to build agents with AI.
Welcome back to the Modern Builder, everyone. I'm really excited about today's episode because we're talking with someone who's not just built businesses, but entire ecosystems of success. My guest today is Thomas Scott, the founder and CEO of Home Run Franchises, a powerhouse group of home service franchise brands designed to help entrepreneurs build highly successful businesses. If you spent any time in the franchise world, you know his name. Thomas has been the force behind nine franchise brands, helped grow over 380 franchise systems, and played a part in recruiting more than 12,000 franchise owners. That's an extraordinary legacy. Before franchising, Thomas was a Pulitzer Prize-nominated journalist, which makes perfect sense when you hear him speak. He's a master storyteller who knows how to connect with brands, with people, in an authentic, meaningful way. Today, we're going to unpack what it really takes to build an epic brand in the modern world, specifically how AI and technology are changing the game across lead generation, marketing, and operation. Thomas, thrilled to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Great, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, Thomas, you've built and scaled more franchise systems than almost anyone I know, and your approach blends creativity, data, and storytelling in such a unique way. Let's start with how all that came together. You spent years perfecting art and science of lead generation and franchising. What's changed the most dramatically in the last few years?
Well, I think the biggest change, is that as buyers of franchises have gotten younger, people 40 and under, millennials, even Gen Zs see entrepreneurship in America is like, that's the plan A. We're almost in this era where jobs are for losers, almost to be blunt about it. Like the idea that you go to college and go into a lot of debt and work for a Fortune 500 company and work in a cube farm for 40 hours a week. Nobody wants to do that anymore. And that when you go on, any social media platform and you see tales of entrepreneurship, whether it's real estate or startup business or the tech field or the home service industry, it's just full of people like really going for it and building amazing businesses and not following the conventional wisdom of their parent. They're not going through the same thing. So it's interesting to see how that shift has kind of made franchising itself as a mainstream model. Franchising used to be this obscure thing that only strange people did. It was kind of like people thought of it kind of like multi-level marketing. It's not at all. And now it's just considered the fastest path to build wealth for a lot of people. So that's been interesting.
Fascinating. It's fascinating to hear that the younger generations are getting into franchises because that's the way I remember it. It's the older people, maybe their second career, they want to get out of corporate America to get into it. And now you're saying that this is the plan A. This is plan A.
Oh, it's plan A. Yeah. We love young entrepreneurs. I mean, we have entrepreneurs. We have about just under 200 locations in our brands, and about 30% are in their 20s. Like they're, Gen Zs, like people that are 23, 24, they typically buy a business right after school or instead of going to school. They make up about 60% of my top performers though. It's crazy. They're way easier to coach. They're self-learning. I tell people, you might as well start a business when you're in 20s. Like when you're my age, you're not going to remember what you did in your 20s anyway. Like, if you think being 20, if somebody had said, there's a way you can build a really huge business by just following some instructions and being part of a team, a social kind of network, why wouldn't you do that?
Have you seen any tools or strategies where tech has really moved the needle for franchise recruitment?
Well, yeah. We're in an AI era, really, to kind of just put it bluntly. I mean, franchises revolve around tech stack. So just a minimum level of technology. And that started with service platforms, CRMs, in a service business, the kind of system that allows you to text, communicate with customers and tracks your vans and, does all kind of service related pieces. That's become more and more important. So I think a couple of things, that the tech stack part of a franchise system has become much more important. This off the shelf technology that a typical franchise system has is way better than a startup business would be. If you think about if you're in real estate, The technology tools you have today are just light years ahead of what they would have been 10 or 15 or even 20 years ago, even 2 years ago. And that's true at all service businesses for franchising for sure. The other big change we see is with the rise of AI, just the idea that you can expand productivity and automate functions and, you know, all the discussion in franchise conferences around the agent process of how to build agents with AI to do automated things. And in our space, we think about customer behavior. What happens when customers, homeowners in particular, start to use AI agents to vet and find people to come into their homes to do repair work? Or, I sell custom closets with our Up Closets brand. What happens when, somebody like uses AI to find their local vendor, vet them, compare reviews, like there's all this background stuff. In fact, we just sold a franchise to somebody in Delaware who did all their franchise research using deep research, I think on Gemini. It's an AI platform that they spent a month doing deep research and ended up buying our franchise. They had no idea who we were or where we were from, but that's how they ended up in our system. And so I think that's the future. It just allows people to do so much research. So when it comes to franchise leads, the way that you make yourself visible is different than it used to be.
And is it basically based on what you just told me, right? Or do you have anything else to add to that, the way it's
Well, I
different?
think people are using AI for all kinds of things, from simple stuff like our franchise coaches use it to analyze data and give franchisees feedback on a weekly basis. Like, hey, here's where you are. Here's where the top performers are. Here's what separates you. Maybe you should try these 3 things this week. You can just get so much more really interesting levels of information that you couldn't get before. Like it would take, manual work. It just wasn't practical. And now people can do that with a flip of a switch, which is
Yep.
amazing.
Snap of a finger. So it sounds like you're utilizing AI in your business pretty much, like you're already there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we use it a lot. Yeah, we use it at all levels. It kind of started with, I'm an early adopter of a lot of things. I read that book, The AI Driven Leader, which I recommend to people who are trying to wrap their head around. And there still are, I think the risk of burying your head in the sand today as a leader of a company is really severe. This is one of those waves that you see like in my 25, 30-year career. you know, Social media came out, Google came out. I remember when PCs came out, even, each of those things, that rise of Google, rise of Facebook, they made us change the way we think about customers and how we interact. And AI is by far the most disruptive. It has more sheer horsepower than any of those things. And so we've tried to stay ahead of it. It changes so fast and there's so many ways you can use it. People are coming up with ways. I use it to talk to my daughters. Like they'll ask me something, it's like I use it to rewrite my emails to franchisees. So I sound softer in some ways or whatever. I think it's interesting to see how that works.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for people to become early adopters such as yourself, because there's going to be a lot of people left behind if they don't really grab a hold of this, what's happening, and it is happening at light speed, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure. It's happening really fast.
You were a journalist before franchising, and now you're one of the best storytellers in the space. How has that skill set influenced your approach to franchise marketing?
Well, that's a great question. I think storytelling as humans, the way I explain it is we use stories to relate to one another, to make sense of the world around us, and to generally make decisions. If you can communicate in a story format, whether you're a salesperson, an ops person, a realtor, whatever your role is in a company, when you're dealing with other people, there's an avenue to use storytelling. When a story is simple and well told, and interesting, people gravitate towards it. So at all levels of what we do, whether it's recruiting franchisees or trying to explain initiatives to a franchisee, or even internally trying to explain staff, like why you should do some things and not others. When you're trying to build your company culture, storytelling for me is the most important business skill. I think you see that a lot. You see it a lot even on social media platforms today with the rise of social selling. You probably see that on TikTok and Instagram, where
Yeah.
people have, TikTok lives and they're selling e-bikes or some other kind of crazy thing that they're selling, but it isn't the thing they're selling that's interesting. It's the story they're telling about this cool e-bike. And, I know, cause I got 4 of them in my garage and I bought them off of one of those things, but it's, it was what I wanted to do with the e-bike that was more interesting than the actual e-bike itself. And it's because when you sell in a story format like that, it's really interesting that, the story that I always tell people is if you go to a restaurant, you and your wife or your partner get all dressed up and you go to a really expensive restaurant and you're excited and you sit down and you ask the waiter, what's good on the menu? Because you look at the menu and like a lot of people, nothing really jumps out. If the waiter goes, well, it's all really good. It doesn't really help you make a decision. In fact, it's a negative. It makes it harder to make a decision. If the same person says, the salmon's really good, I sell a lot of that. It's imported and da 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 da. But the real star on the menu is the margarita pizza. The chef comes in at 3 a.m. in the morning and makes the dough by hand, and we grow our own herbs and heirloom tomatoes. And if you like margarita pizza, I think it's one of the better ones around. People would buy that all the time, not because they like margarita pizza, because they can visualize the pizza in their head. And what you want when you go to a restaurant is positive reinforcement of an experience. So if you take that same vignette and apply it to any business situation, no matter what you're doing, it works. I think realtors need to use how to story tell. When we were doing staging with our first franchise system, a big company called Show Homes is the largest home stager in the country. I learned how to stage houses from a woman named Gertrude Gardner in New Orleans. She did Garden District New Orleans homes. That was her niche. She's long since just, but she would only show one house a day to people when they came into New Orleans to buy a house. She would do all this research and she would set this house up. She would do a 2 or 3 hour showing of the house. It would walk through every room, explain every feature with a story. And it was like it had music and smells and all kind of amazing things going on. And she would almost always buy that house. That's in fact, we learned that there's a lot of psychology around selling a house and showing a house. She wouldn't show you another house the same day. You had to wait another day to go to the next house and do the same thing. And I think that's the power of a story. Like we're predictable as humans. We buy into it. So I think if you apply that to any business scenario, you can escalate or level up what you're doing just by being a good, thoughtful storyteller.
Totally agree. And I know what I'm having for dinner tonight. I'm going for a
Yeah.
margarita pizza.
Margarita pizza. Yeah.
And now
How many times have you been to a restaurant and you don't know what to order and you really just want somebody to say, the
push me over the
to the
edge.
left is the good thing to get. Just get that and you'll have a
That's
great,
it.
that's all
You're
they
the
want.
expert. You tell
Yeah.
me, I'm buying it. Yes.
Right.
And now AI can actually enhance storytelling, not replace it, but I mean, you can use AI to analyze audience sentiment, generate content ideas, or even personalize campaigns, right?
Oh
To
yeah, it's
inspire
crazy.
segments.
This is crazy. People
You
listen to
see,
sales conversations and analyze sentiment and come up with, you missed 4 chances to close that deal, or you could have done this and try this next time. It's amazing what people do.
amazing. Do you see AI as like a creative ally in marketing or more of a technical tool for
I think it's
efficiency?
a huge productivity boost. I think you can expect more out of your team too, because like a smaller team can do more. I don't think so much that it eliminates jobs. I don't think about it that way. I think about the people you do have can just simply do a lot more. There's a metric in franchising that you need one franchise business coach for every 20 or 25 owners that you have. So that's about a realistic boundary. You don't need, less people when you have AI. Now they can just do more.
Right.
They can analyze sales, they can get to sentiment, they can give an owner way more insight into their business than the owner has time to use. Even a competent AI user still is going to be busy. That doesn't mean they're going to use it just because they know how. So I think it's fascinating what it's done for productivity. And we use it to rewrite a lot of our communications. We'll type up something and we'll say, like, I've got to say this. I have to explain this to a franchisee, and it's going to come off kind of as a fierce or somewhat harsh, strict conversation because I'm a franchisor. And sometimes you have to do that in a franchise system. I want to be stern, but I also want to point out things that they're doing that are really good. And here's the way I would like to write it. I'm a professional writer. I know how to write really well, but it amazes me. And I have mine trained to write in my own style with a healthy mix of Simon Sinek kind of language. And it's kind of cool what it'll do if you train it right. And, when people learn how to do that, but, I have these really thoughtful, like detailed conversations that read just like I wrote them with my language, but sometimes it'll organize the thoughts in a way that are just more digestible by the average person. And I think that's fascinating.
Great insights. Yeah, it's like giving everyone superpowers, right? I mean, they can
It
test
is.
messages, target smarter, scale without losing authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And I think People are really have filters to it. So we don't use a lot of AI attendants to answer phone calls, for instance, in our businesses. That was a big rush. And I found that people's filter for what is and isn't AI is so sensitive right now that you have to be careful not to make it look like AI. So, take out emojis, dashes, and, make sure the language looks human and reflects the way that you talk to people so that it is authentic. And that's a challenge for a lot of people. Like, how do you use it in a way that doesn't look like it did all the work for you? Like that's interesting.
Right, right. Well, you've also you've helped over 380 franchise systems grow. And you
Right.
look at the best performers, what separates their marketing from the average ones?
Well, I think again, it goes back to story-based marketing. I mean, you have to have as a franchise system, if you're trying to build, if you're going to get into franchising and build a national brand, and that's a great way to build a company if you don't want to do venture capital or the traditional tech startup. Franchising is just another way to grow a large brand by using franchise owners and getting people at a team. I think it comes down to are your owners happy and are they profitable? Those are the two things that matter. Like I have to be able to really like the business. I have to have a business that I enjoy, a business that, people would do again. If you asked them, how's your up closets or dryer vent superheroes or lighting squad franchise, you would go, these guys are really cool. It's a really fun business. I enjoy operating it. The culture of the company is good and I make a lot of money. Like that's important too, both of those things. But you can make a lot of money in a business and be just miserable. I've sold businesses before that I loved, but that just were just worthless when it came to culture or the experience of ownership. So you got to do both of those. So brands that do really well are very good at leveraging stories about those two things, one way or the other. And that's kind of where it comes from.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. Let's shift gears to operations, the part that
Yeah.
most people don't see. But that's really where the real profits are made or lost, right?
Right.
Franchising is all about systems, and now we've got AI tools managing scheduling, training, customer feedback loops, even predictive maintenance. How do you see technology changing franchise operations today? Operations.
Well, I think, from simple stuff on the marketing front, like just better targeting, a lot of sales automation on, how do you follow up with somebody? Like there's a lot of AI there giving you insights into things. On the operations side, in our service platforms we use to run our trucks, like and renewals and upsells and online bookings and, this kind of concept, we call it the Shopify of the customer experience in the home service space where you think about shopping cart functions the way you go to like Amazon or, you put something in your cart and it kind of tags you and thinks about, oh, you might like this other thing. That's really common in a retail experience today online. It's not very common in a home service space. I think the next big frontier is home service businesses. This could be real estate too, are beginning to Shopify their customer interactions. Like when you go to book a time for to have your dryer vent cleaned or to book a consultation time, the whole interactive experience you have with the company's technology, which has a lot of AI functionality, is starting to change. We use AI to design closets now. We have software with integrated AI that helps us design closets based on designs that people already buy. So our designers start out with a much more elevated design based on that type of closet in that part of the country, like in colors and hardware and tower styles and drawer designs, all that kind of stuff. Like it's a crazy time to get into service businesses right now. The technology is just wide open. There's so much innovation going on. It's an exciting time. It's one of the reasons the franchise industry is growing at the rate it is right now.
So all this AI you don't see as affecting the franchise business that much other than enhancing it.
In a positive way. Yeah. I don't think
Yeah.
there's no negative stuff. We benefit in the franchise industry from all the people whose jobs are impacted, and that's mostly like where I see the impact for AI is mid-level managers, white collar jobs. A lot of people who are managing 15 to 25 self direct reports, like at a Microsoft or a GM or somewhere. A lot of those people have somewhat risky job futures. And so they're looking to franchising as a way to kind of build some stability in their careers. Now I see a lot of remote work, which was very popular for the last 3 or 4 years post COVID. And that's on the decline. So many people are pushing people back to the office and they've realized that in office people are just more valuable. Even if you personally feel more productive at remote, it's maybe not that great for the company. That's why 70% of companies last year implemented pretty strict return to office policies. And we certainly went more in that direction. We still have a bunch of remote people, but I think a lot of those people are also like seeing that their careers are a little bit in jeopardy. So they're looking to entrepreneurship and franchising of a way to kind of stable because you get used to remote work. If I could do it for a company, why can't I just run a business out of the same room?
Right.
Just
Absolutely.
change the name on the back of your wall.
Do you, are there any operational tools or systems you found indispensable across your brands?
I mean, a lot of our vendors weave AI into their services. We have professional chat GPT that we use like a pro level that we have modified. I think the next step is the agentization, I think is the word that they use of like creating agents to automate things, to do things, like not just to go to the AI and ask it to do things, but to have agents that use AI to vet things, like to find customer lists, to build lookalike lists, to queue up data lists. Like there's so much data available today with AI that you couldn't get to before. And that's really interesting. We have systems they're kind of new to franchising. You may know more about these, but they're called digital door knocking systems. Companies like Glass House is the vendor I'm most familiar with. But, you can pull all your jobs into a map, draw a box around the neighborhood that you did a closet in, and it gives you all the homeowner information for everybody on both sides of the street. You can text and email them using publicly available information. Doesn't do any of the do not call stuff. No, you can use an AI agent to mine that. You can end up with four more closets on the same house, or if you're doing dryer vents, it's crazy what the potential of those tools is.
But it is exciting, like you said, for
Yeah.
a lot of people, especially in your niche, very exciting. Where do you see operations heading in the next 3 to 5 years with the continued rise of AI?
Well, I think at some point it'll level out. I mean, it'd be like, when social media came around or when Google become standard. I think one of the big things is how's the customer behavior going to change? Like, I know we're all kind of adapting to use it, and there's certainly like a race to be cutting edge. But what happens when the average customer begins to use it in normal ways? And what happens when there's advertising on AI platforms, which there isn't today? How do you adapt your company to that orientation, whether that's I could see where in real estate, somebody might say, like, I live in Berry Farms is the name of my neighborhood or Tollgate or whatever you want to call it. And can you give me the top five realtors that have done deals in this price range and who have a history of doing, higher to list price, shorter, whatever the metrics are you want. And an agent would actually pull all that research together for you and vet them for you. Like that's significant change. Like what happens to when that happens and you haven't even thought about how do I prepare my company to be visible for AI? Like there's a whole set of things. Like I'm not even sure a website's needed today. Like it's gotten that but you need all these set of things to push content to AI. I'm not sure you actually need it. You need a sign up page or a
Right.
funnel page or, a shopping cart of some kind. But it's interesting to see what's going to happen. What happens, AI just makes people more and more productive. I mean, at the end of the day, our dryer vent cleaners, dryer vent superheroes brand, like AI is not going to clean your dryer vent, but AI certainly could kind of educate a customer when their dryer shuts off and they have a code that says you need to have your dryer vent cleaned. They could connect them with you much faster.
Right. Kind of like home inspectors, right? You can have an AI home inspect your entire house and tell you exactly where your problems are. But you still need that person to do it.
But yeah, like our prep up, we do a lot of like we hit some of the points that in our concierge program for homes for sale, we kind of hit the points that a home inspector's likely to look for. We just nip those in the bud for really low, we just knock all those off the list. And so, yeah, I mean, but just the overall education stuff is, and just get people comfortable with ranges and I got this proposal from a closet company. Can you compare it? Do you think this is reasonable or not reasonable? And it'll give you like some of that feedback. Where people doing that now? They'll get three or four quotes and the AI will tell them who to use. Like it's crazy, like what people are doing. But, as people get more and more advanced and comfortable with it, which I've seen a huge shift in the last year from 2 years ago, where people were like, what is that? It's going to take over the world, to now it's just an integrated productivity tool that you would think about use it. There was a really funny comic of somebody went into a coffee shop and the barista and the guy buying the coffee were using AI to respond to each other. Like, what do I say when I go into the coffee shop? And like, it's kind of like it's gotten to be that level of ridiculousness in some cases, but it is a cool tool.
Yeah, completely. And you're ahead of the game more so than most people. But what are the pain points you have, or what kind of friction are you running into in your business, if any?
Well, friction's important. I think one of the things that we address really aggressively in our brands, and I think it's good advice for anybody running a company, is to think about what we call generational selling. Is to think about the way each generation of buyer. There's four main groups: baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. It'll be Gen Alpha, right? Not too far in the future, but the four that we have now, each of those four groups behaves very differently. If I look at the average Gen Z or millennial phone, if I pick up their phone, the phone icon is hidden in a folder somewhere. You have to dig for it. They don't like to talk on the phone as a demographic group, and they like extreme transparency to pricing. Like they won't do business with people that don't have transparent pricing. On the other end, I'm 55, people older than me, we're just conditioned to talk on the phone and fill out forms and have somebody come to my house with pricing samples and waste 3 hours of my time. That's just normal to me. Like I wouldn't challenge that. But my 29 and 30-year-old daughters won't have anything to do with that. So if you're running a company, this friction of how do you learn to adapt your behavior, style, sales process to each of those four groups is really important. I think that's a big performance breakthrough for a lot of people. You can't treat every customer the same. Like based on how old they are, they have very different expectations. Almost the 40 and under and 40 and older. It's almost like Republicans and Democrats. They don't speak the same language at all. Like at
Right.
all. Like it's totally different sales processes. We built Up Closets, our custom closet brand, which is almost at 100 locations, primarily focusing on 40 and under customers. That's who our whole sales process is built for, that millennial and younger buyer, and they make up about 65% of our customer base. And we just kill it with that demographic because we tell people how much their closet's going to cost before we ever come to the house. We say it's going to cost between this and this, and these are some examples of what it might look like. And then we can kind of get in and mess with it when we get there. But like they know exactly what they're getting into before we step across the threshold. And that's a radical thought in a consultative sales environment. People don't, when was the last time you had something like that happen in your house? If you ever had a quote for a kitchen or a bath, or like they want to come hang out in your house and measure stuff and talk to you and sell you things. And you can't do that with young people. They don't play
No.
that game.
Yeah. The HVAC person come over to give me a quote and took 2, 3 hours maybe, right?
Yeah, but if you could say, look, a basic repair is $400, a more complicated repair is 800 to $1,200, and I have to replace the system at 6,500. That's what you're going to be dealing with. Like you would be okay with that, and
Right.
would you just be a little more trusting to that person. It's kind of a trust economy that we're getting into. Because you can verify all that stuff. You can say, well, this person's going to put a Train or a Goodman unit in. The price is 12,000. Is that a reasonable price? And the AI will say, well, no, that's a ridiculous price. It should be this amount because that's a $4,000 unit, not an $8,000 unit. Customers can figure that stuff out on their own now with AI too. It's not just a one-way street. Customer has the same horsepower that you have.
Same tools, exactly.
Yeah.
Same horsepower. Great way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, this has been a very powerful conversation. You've built and grown more brands than most people ever will, and you've seen the full evolution of franchising. If you had to give one piece of advice to entrepreneurs or franchisers trying to adapt to this new AI driven world, what would it be?
I'm a kind of put my foot on the gas kind of entrepreneur, but my advice is always is adjust your mindset, and half measures almost never work in business. Just you can't half do a business. I'm very much in the burn the boats camp of, like go without a safety net. But I think with the tools you have today, your chances of being successful are just so much higher than they used to be. Like you can make mistakes and survive and still do really well. Just
Like
go
just do
for it.
great. Yeah, technology should enhance who we are, right? Not replace it. I think your story really drives that home. But for those that want to follow you, your work, or learn more about home run franchises, where's the best place to connect?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. I do videos every day on all the platforms, but you can look me up on LinkedIn. Thomas Scott, homerunfranchises.com is our kind of company website, but check me out. Love to send me a DM.
Awesome. Thomas, thanks again for joining. This was incredible. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and share and keep your notifications on. We'll see you next time
All right.
as we keep exploring how AI and smart systems are transforming the real estate and building industries, one conversation at a time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Stop that.